Okay, I implore you to vote against this motion, and even more importantly, when you're older, to never ever vote Conservative.
Straight on Bernard.
We'll now have questions from...
No, we won't.
We need to get the 3 in first. Yeah.
Come on.
Stay on the ball.
Mr. Wills.
I'm very sorry I don't have many statistics because A, I only knew that I was going to do this about 5 minutes ago, and B, I'm not very political myself, so I don't really have this at hand. But firstly, I'm quite happy we can just ignore everything Archie said, because how good the Tories are is irrelevant to this. The question is how bad the Labour Party is. And I'm sure you all agree, because it's completely obvious, that the Labour Party is completely useless and bankrupt. And just as they have always done, as they did in 1979, and as they've always done, they've left this country in an absolutely disastrous state for the Conservative Party to put right. Now let's take some examples of why. Education, education, education. Things can only get better. Billions and billions and billions of pounds of your money spent, I mean your money, not mine, because it's not paid for yet. You're going to be paying for it. Okay, all that money spent, can you honestly say that education is fixed? Can you honestly say that we need to close down as an independent school because we might as well all go off to Greenford because it's just as good? No, of course not. State education is a complete mess, and it's a complete mess because Labour have singly refused to and failed to reform it. They've been stuck to their leftist comprehensive ideology and completely failed to reform it. Is the NHS completely fixed? Of course not. The NHS has been good for only one group of, I say people, but good for only one group. And those are the bacteria that have thrived in our dirty hospitals and haven't been cleaned under this Labour government. And what else was promised? An end to boom and bust. Are we in a bust now? We're in the biggest bust since the Depression. And the opposition sort of said, well, you know, it's the fault of America. It's the fault of America. America allowed a massive bubble of inflationary bubble by changing the rate of inflation. No, it was Gordon Brown. Gordon Brown did it. He's up to his neck in it. This is his fault. And of course, my final point, the most serious point of all, is the disastrous foreign policy that this government has gone along with. Sending our troops with a weak mandate, with insufficient troops in insufficient numbers to fight in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then just sort of sitting idly by and not really caring. Okay? When Churchill failed after Gallipoli, he resigned. He planned the invasion of Gallipoli in the First World War. He resigned and he went to fight in the trenches. Do you see Tony Blair going to fight in Afghanistan to try and put right the mess that he has created? No. This government is economically useless, it's morally bankrupt, and we need to get rid of it as soon as possible, and as happened in 1979, we need the Conservatives in to put it all right again.
Chairman, the motion before the House today is that has the Labour government failed Britain? And the answer is unequivocally no. What is the Britain that we are talking about? The proposition you're speaking about a Britain of a rich and elite few. In fact, the Labour government has been expanding opportunities for the many. Yes, we are in a recession, as my friend said, caused by America. Did Britain fall into recession when the dot-com bubble burst in 1999? No. Why? Because of the action of this Labour government to stimulate the economy. Yes, we are in recession now. What happened yesterday? Unemployment fell. Let us compare unemployment now, and youth unemployment now, to the disaster when the Tory party were in power in the early 1990s. Why is it that banks are still lending billions of pounds to the government now to continue to invest in these key services, Because, of course, debt under this Labour government has fallen consistently year after year as a percentage of GDP. That is why Britain is able to be in the strong economic situation it currently is at present. People speak about the spending of the Labour government, but let us not forget why that spending was necessary. It was necessary because of the legacy of the previous Conservative government, because of 18 years of systematic neglect, where the NHS was underfunded, where the transport system was underfunded, where the education service was underfunded. Yes, if you happen to be very rich, you would prosper under that government. But that spending has been necessary to invest in those services and infrastructure which are so badly neglected under the previous government. This government has transformed Britain, and it has transformed it for the better. It has brought equality and access to a whole range of people who were previously outcasts in their own society. And that can only be welcome. We are a more equal, a more fair, a more free society now than we were then. People often talk, for example, about our record on civil liberties. Well, I think we've done rather well. Yes, we have taken the actions necessary to protect British citizens. Compare and contrast the atrocities, terrorist atrocities, committed under this government with Conservatives' inability to prevent the IRA. So what? More CCTV, ID card. I think it's the price worth paying. Has Ealing Broadway been bombed under this government? No. Was it under the weak terrorist opportunities of the previous government? Yes, it was. Okay? And I think, therefore, that is indicative of our strong response to terrorism against Tories' weak response. On the foreign policy, we were laughed and ridiculed under the previous government in Europe. We are now part of Europe. We signed the Lisbon Treaty. That can be a good thing for all British citizens. Relations with the US are and remain friendly. And let us contrast our opposition to Mugabe in Zimbabwe and his policies with the policies, the failure of the previous Tory government to oppose apartheid in South Africa. There is a clear distinction between a Labour government which has brought about the investment necessary, the transformation of our constitution and our society for the freedom of all our citizens, with the archaic, reactionary, privileged defence of a Conservative government. And therefore, this government has not failed Britain. It has brought about at great expense the change necessary. And to hand it over now to the Conservative Party would be a disaster for everyone in this country. So I urge you to oppose the motion.
Absolutely nobody. Back then.
First, Labour tend to justify still spending billions of pounds on Africa when we can't even afford to pay for our own country.
We justify it on the basis that I appreciate this may be rather difficult, if you forgive me, for someone who goes to independent school in West London. But we justify it on the idea that most British citizens are considerably better off than people in Africa. And it is I agree, it is part and parcel of the Labour ideology that we will help those people, come what may, because that is what is necessary to do. But I would also make this point to say that this is a policy established by the Labour Party, and one in which, in fact, is going to be free, so they tell us, from the Conservative Acts, who are also going to maintain, so they tell us, the overseas development budget. So I think whoever you vote for, the overseas development budget will remain the same.
Any more questions for the opposition?
How do they justify Gordon Brown being their leader when he sold all the country's gold at the bottom of the market and said in advance he's going to do it? That's to be the stupidest mistake made by any Chancellor of the Exchequer. And fair enough, that was the previous government's fault, but he was the person that did it, and he's now our country's leader. And if he's making elementary mistakes in that position, then how on earth can we trust him in this economic recession to get us out of it?
Contrast the flexibility of how we have managed the economy with the dogmatism of the Conservatives. So, for example, these people are selling gold. Let us not forget there was Lord Lawson in 1993 who sold all Britain's gold reserves to preserve the ERM and who tripled interest rates in one day. Now, this was you cannot hide the fact that you are selling £5 billion worth of gold, I'm afraid. You know, the markets will find out.